And hello, everyone. Welcome to Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and also check us out on Twitter using the handle at Rich Sports Talk. And if you're new, please hit that subscribe button. Check out our community page. We have polls all the time. We actually have a poll in the live chat right now. So if you're joining us during the live chat, the poll is open. I will get to it later, but I'm asking, are the Giants already regretting not drafting a quarterback in the 2022 draft? I apologize for this being a little bit later. We will be on later tonight to recap the Jets preseason, but I wanted to start with the Giants today. And let's be honest, there's one huge storyline from the second preseason game. And I don't know what it is, but the New York preseason football has just scared the hell out of both fan bases with arguably the most exciting player, the player that the fan bases want to see the most probably this year. Zach Wilson goes down the first preseason game. Kayvon Thibodeau went down in the second one with a knee injury, but according to Adam Schefter, not as serious. It was looking good last night. You saw after the game, he was walking around, no knee brace. It is an MCL. He will be out roughly 3 to 4 weeks, and there is an outside chance Kayvon will be ready for the opener. There's so much to dissect, Giant fans, once we get into this one. Now, we could talk a little bit about the injury bug. We're going to talk about that. Daniel Jones, obviously a huge talking point. But I did want to start with what has been the most impactful part of this preseason, unfortunately, for the Giants, and it has been the injuries. And you can't tell me that the preseason, and this is the annoying thing about the preseason, is every year you're just hoping to get through preseason without a major injury. And we saw it last year with the Jets losing their best defensive player, arguably in Carl Lawson, even before they played a preseason game. The scare was Zach Wilson. The preseason doesn't really have value for me. I actually value the joint practices a lot more. I think that they're more valuable to these teams. And a part of me feels like I understand they're never going to fully get rid of the preseason. It gives them a revenue stream. But I would not be shocked that in the next NFL PA, especially now with the 17-game season, I don't think they'll completely obliterate the preseason. But I think you only need 2 preseason games. I mean, let's be honest. With the joint practices now, the NFL is also trying to reduce practices, reduce hitting. Like, they're trying to reduce injuries. The biggest thing is to remove games. No, Stephen T brings up a great point. It should be Rob about the field. No, the MetLife turf has gotten a bad rap, and I've been personally, I feel like if you can grow grass. I understand the benefit of turf. I get it, but when you're talking about $1 billion industry, when you're talking about the ability, like, look, if this was a dome stadium, that's one thing. You can't go grass inside. But if you're an outdoor stadium or you have a retractable roof, do everything you can to get grass. I mean, the players have said that they like the grass better. It's better for their health. But unfortunately, Philly doesn't use grass. They actually use regular grass. They do use a grass field, and the Giants do use turf. And look, the turf didn't cause the Kayvon injury last night. It was a bang play, got run into. Now, I know a lot of people have been debating whether it was a dirty play or not a dirty play. I'm of the opinion that it wasn't intentionally dirty. It's one of those weird plays, too, that unfortunately, this is what also happens in the preseason is when you get a lot of guys. This is the other hard part about the preseason, which I also think there's a lot more injuries in the preseason, is you have a mix of different types of players. You have players that are fighting for their roster spot and are trying to do everything to make the roster, but they're probably not good enough to make the roster. So they're out there with not the best form, not the best technique. And of course, they're not going to get the majority of the first team reps at practice. So there can be sloppy play. And it felt like that's what happened with Kayvon last night. But the good news for Thibodeau is he should be back in 3 to 4 weeks. But the biggest problem for this Giant team, and one of my biggest concerns for this organization coming into the season, was like the Jets last year, I didn't feel the Giants had great depth. I thought they had a very good draft, but already out of the 11 picks, 2 are missing the season. We found out that inside linebacker Darian Beavers, kid I really like from Cincinnati, tore his ACL. He will be done for the season. This was someone that you were looking to pair next to Blake Martinez, could be a high-end backup for this team. And you also look too that Marcus McKeithen, like the only other offensive lineman selected, well, not the only other one, but the day 3 selection on offensive line also had an ACL injury ending rookie season. So you now have 2 rookies in this rookie class that the Giants really wanted to get a lot of play out of. Well, they're out for the season. And you look, a lot of these guys have also been banged up, and a lot of them are the rookies in this class. Joshua Zato, the third round guard, Cordell Flott, the third rounder, Dane Belton, the fourth rounder. And you can't also tell me, too, that they've become a bit of a cautionary tale because the Giants got banged up in the first game against the Patriots. They got a lot of banged up injuries in the second game. And it was funny because Robert Saleh for the Jets made a comment that he felt that the joint practices, if they went well and he felt you could get a good enough evaluation that he wouldn't play starters. And I am curious because the timing was very interesting where all of a sudden, after the Giants had a couple of injuries last night, got banged up, the Jets already had the banged up to Zach Wilson. He's probably going to miss the first start of the season. All of a sudden, Robert Saleh came out this morning saying, yeah, we're pretty much not playing any of our starters tonight. So it'll be interesting to see what the Jets do tonight. And look, the upside for playing young players, and this is the other hard part too, and I've been saying this for weeks now, is I know a lot of people want to give these coaches crap for playing these players in the preseason, but when you're on teams like the Jets and the Giants, it's different. Where the Rams have a super team, the Rams know pretty much what their 45 of the 53 spots are going to be. They have a lot of veteran players. When you have a younger team like this and a lot of young guys, you need to get them reps. And with the reduced practices, with the reduced hitting, it limits where and when these teams can practice and how much reps these guys can get out on the field. So you look at the situation for these coaches, like they almost feel like they have to play guys in the preseason. So it has not been fun for the Giants with a bunch of injuries coming out. And really, it will be disappointing if Kayvon isn't out there week 1 because he's really the picture of what the Giants are hoping is a new regime and a new era, especially with this new front office. Because look, Evan Neal was the other top pick. I get it, but let's be honest, tackles, you don't want them making headlines because let's be honest, if they're making headlines, it's usually because they're injured or they're not playing well. So you don't want any headlines around Evan Neal. Overall, I'm concerned about the depth of this offense. You've seen also Feliciano get banged up. I'm concerned about this offensive line going into week 1. So the injury bug has been critical to this Giant team. And really, it's frustrating because when you're looking at this Giant roster, they don't have a lot of high-end talent, and they don't also have a lot of great depth right now. So these injuries are key. And it's also key that you've seen a lot of these day 2 and day 3 rookies who you were hoping to either get significant playing time this preseason haven't because of injuries, or guys who you're hoping maybe at the end of the season could be rotational players or developmental projects. I mean, they've already lost a linebacker. They've lost an offensive lineman. Like, that is critical for the development of this team, and it has to be incredibly frustrating for this front office. Now, the biggest news out of last night is still the best news is Kayvon Thibodeau out 3 to 4 weeks. Nothing serious. I mean, if he had torn an ACL last night, that would have been utterly devastating to this organization because, I mean, let's be honest. And Damian Woody also saying that wasn't a dirty play, legal block last night. And it's tough because for probably 2 hours, Giant fans felt like Jet fans did with Zach Wilson. Now, again, they're both completely different players, but you can't tell me as Giant fans, and I'll get to Daniel Jones in a second, that Kayvon's probably the one player, when I've talked to Giant fans, he's the one player that they're most excited to see. They're most excited to see his development this year. And the mere fact that he could have missed this entire season is terrifying. Stephen T, we were all high on KD. I got scared like any Giants fan when that happened. Thankfully, it's not too bad. That's the good news about last night. But still, the Giants, of course, losing Darian Beavers, torn ACL. He will be out the entire season. Giants have already lost 2 players for the season from this draft class. And it's frustrating. And this segues perfectly into my next segment, which is Daniel Jones. Now, Daniel Jones played well last night. He moved the football, and even the interception, I wouldn't say was his fault last night. But to me, that was the high end of what Daniel Jones is. And the feeling I get from Giant fans, and again, if I'm wrong, if you disagree with me, put it in the chat, put it in the comments. If you're not here during the live stream, I will make sure to answer your questions. I even have a poll up right now, which is, will the Giants regret not drafting a quarterback in the 2022 draft class? Because I do think that this is very important, which is last night, it just kind of felt like, like that's what it kind of feels like with Daniel Jones. Like I feel like there's three groups of this fan base right now with Daniel Jones. There's a portion of the fan base that is completely out on Daniel Jones. You have a group that is hopeful, and I think this is the smallest group, hopeful that Daniel Jones finds it and turns it around this year. And then you have people on the fence. And so far, the people on the fence, when you've seen the off-season struggles, you've seen the struggles in practice, you've seen the videos in practice of Daniel Jones not playing well. And last night, I think, perfectly summed up what Daniel Jones is. And it is interesting because Tyrod Taylor is the backup quarterback on this team. And I did love how that became a story, how everyone's like, oh my God, Tyrod's getting first-team reps. He's going to be starter. I was on with Keys to the City on the channel. You can go check that video out. And even I was saying, yeah, I don't think that that's a huge storyline. They need to figure out Daniel Jones. Like they're going to run that into the ground until they can figure it out. But I did have a thought today, and you guys can agree with me or disagree in the chat. But this is the realization I've come to, which is for me, Daniel Jones feels like the poor man's version of Tyrod Taylor and the version that turns the football over more. Tyrod Taylor to me is a decent quarterback. He to me is, if he was a backup quarterback, could inject life on a team for a couple of weeks, use that athleticism to make plays and surprise people. But if you were to ask him to do it a full 17 game schedule, I do think it would be very tough for him. Now, Daniel Jones, to me, is kind of the same thing, except he does have a bigger turnover issue. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons they brought in Tyrod Taylor. They were both similar in their skill sets and what they could bring to the table and bring to this offense. But the problem with this Giant offense is they are in a rebuild right now. And the biggest problem is you need players to elevate a quarterback, or you need the quarterback to elevate players. And the Giants right now are in a position where neither is going to happen this year. I really like Wan'Dale Robinson. I think he's looked very good in training camp and can be a very nice receiver. And I think the Giants have, from top to bottom, a very nice receiving core. I think that there's a lot of versatility. You have some playmaking ability there. But let's be honest. Do they have a number one that a team is game planning for right now? Do they have a number one receiver that teams, defenses are trying to key on, that feel like we have to take them out of the game or else they're going to make our life miserable? Giants don't really have that. Now, if you had a great quarterback, you could really elevate this wide receiver room. But I don't think this wide receiver room is going to elevate the quarterback. Giants also don't have a great playmaking tight end. Giants have a rebuilding offensive line that I think will be a lot better this year, but isn't going to dominate the trenches and isn't going to really impose their will on teams. And then you have Saquon. Even if Saquon returns fully healthy, plays 17 games as an elite running back, yes, that could elevate Daniel Jones in this offense, but I'm not sure how much it is truly going to elevate this offense. So the Giants right now are kind of like in a rut, because what you saw last night from Daniel Jones is the best you're going to see from Daniel Jones, which is an efficient quarterback that can occasionally make a play with his legs. And that's what you want. You want him to just move the football and not turn the football over. But let's be honest, even on his best day, if Daniel Jones is throwing for, let's say he combines 2 touchdowns, a running and a passing or some combination of that too, and only turns the football over once, Is that enough for this team to win? Like, do they have enough pieces on this team to overcome that? And unfortunately, I don't think I think the answer is no. And it's frustrating because I really like some of the pieces on this team. And I do think the Giants spent this year getting some nice bedrock pieces, which was a great pass rusher in the draft, solidifying the tackle positions. But it kind of feels like, yeah, but with a lot of these Giants in their skill positions right now and the positions on this team. And if you agree with me, you can let me know in the chat. If you disagree, you can let me know in the chat. We'd love to hear from you guys. Chat is always open. Please let me know. The way I look at this for the Giants is it feels like there's a but. Like they have two really good potential bedrock tackle pieces, but the interior of the offensive line is okay. Probably not a long-term answer. This receiving room, top to bottom, is really good. They have a lot of good versatility, but they really don't have that difference maker. You're hoping Robinson, you're hoping Tony, but realistically, you might not have that difference maker in the wide receiving room. You have upgraded the tight end position, but is it really a big threat? Yes, Saquon Barkley is healthy, but you still worry about the health. And if Barkley does go down, you're not sure if this will be a reliable running game behind Daniel Jones. So last year's draft was crucial. It was adding key pieces to this offense. It was really restarting the rebuilding project. But right now, the Giants offense, they're starting to put up the sheetrock, basically. Like they've done the electrics, but they're just starting to put up the sheetrock. They still have a long way to go before finishing this project. There is work to be done. And unfortunately for Daniel Jones, I think he was overdrafted. I did like him coming out of college. I thought he could be a late first round pick for a really good team, sit for a year or two, develop, and potentially take over. But when the Giants drafted him that early and when they've asked him to help elevate this team, it's clear that he doesn't have the skill set to do it. And look, I think Daniel Jones can still have a decent career in the NFL. I think he can be a high-end backup. Maybe if he goes to a really great offense with great pieces around him, he can be a serviceable quarterback and help that team win, kind of like what Ryan Tannehill did in Tennessee. But for where the Giants are now, they really need one of two things, and they unfortunately don't have it. They either needed an offense that was going to elevate Daniel Jones, and I don't think they have all those pieces of the puzzle yet. But more importantly, I don't think they have the quarterback to elevate this offensive piece because there's some nice pieces on this offense that you're intrigued by. Wan'Dale Robinson, Kadarius Toney. I mean, you're hoping Kenny Galladay can get it together. I mean, there's some interesting pieces on this offense we were going, yeah, if they had a better quarterback, like this could be a very intriguing offense. How they use these weapons, how they disperse the football, how they move the football down the field. It's going to be a very intriguing year to see how they implement all of that. So I'm excited to watch how the Giants are going to incorporate these young players, but it kind of just feels like we know the answer to we know how the movie's going to end, and we still have like an hour left in the movie. We're just waiting for it. It's anticlimactic because and let's be honest, Giant fans, like if you disagree with me, let me know in the chat, rip me. Like I would love to hear from you. But the way I'm looking at this right now, I just do not see Daniel Jones being a franchise quarterback. And it kind of feels like the Giants are moving off from him, but they just haven't gotten there yet. Like we know the end is going to be coming, but we have to basically sit through a year. Which brings me to the poll question, brings me to a very polarizing topic that I have talked about ad nauseum involving the draft. And I will get to your questions in a second, but please fill out the poll above. Do the Giants miss an opportunity to draft a quarterback? And I remember after the draft, when I did my Giants evaluation in my grade, I said, look, the Giants had an unbelievable draft. However, I think they missed a key component of this draft, which is, and I will preface this by saying, because I know people are going to jump down my throat. So before you get that opportunity, let me preface this by saying, I understand that this was not a great quarterback class. I get it. I know it wasn't sexy. I know it wasn't appealing. And the NFL agreed. You saw only one quarterback go in the first round, and then you saw a bunch of guys go in the third round. Look, I get it. I know it was the most appealing draft in the world. I know it wasn't the prettiest draft in the world. But I just remember sitting there in the third round when Malik Willis was there. And he, to me, was the only quarterback I had a first round grade on, because when I looked at the quarterbacks, like in college, like you really need to have something that really stands out and something that really pops on tape and something that shows to me you can do something special at the next level. And I never really saw any of that from any of these quarterbacks except Malik Willis, and that was his athleticism. So when the Giants had the opportunity in the third round, not once but twice, to take Willis, and they passed on him both times, I remember coming on afterwards, and I've had this debate, even had this debate with Trevor Keys on the episode where he talked about the Giants last week, which is I just felt the Giants missed a golden opportunity to get a quarterback. And look, I know what a lot of you are going to say. Well, they need to figure out Daniel Jones. This quarterback class was bad. I get all that. That is completely fair. And I understand Snoopy brings up a good point. Look, I know next year's quarterback class is a lot better. But this is the way I looked at it. You are going into a season with Daniel Jones, who it feels like this organization and most of the fan base has already moved off of. The Giants had 2 third-round picks, and to be honest with you, I didn't really love either. It felt like they got 2 really long-term projects, one at guard, that you were hoping could maybe make an impact next season. And the way I looked at this too with the Giants was, look, the way their roster is, they need to get guys that can contribute this year and not further down the road. But it also kind of buys into the point that I've been saying. I feel this organization is moving off Daniel Jones because a lot of these guys are more long-term projects and not guys to immediately help this year. But that brings me back to the quarterback position. With Malik Willis, I just have this feeling that he's going to be at least brought along in Tennessee and get a fair opportunity. But I would ask Giant fans this. If Daniel Jones is what we think he is, and we get to week 6, which is basically the middle of October, and it's clear there's no direction, this isn't going to work. The problem with the Giants now is you have 11 games with Tyrod Taylor or Daniel Jones. See, with the quarterbacks in last year's draft, I would have taken a shot in the third round because best case scenario, if you hit on one of these quarterbacks, you might not have to draft one next year. You might have your guy, and the benefit of these quarterbacks is you don't get the 5th-year option, but you're also paying them under $1 million or around $1 million a year. Like the amount you are saving, even we talk about first-round quarterback savings. Imagine the savings you had on a guy in the third round. And the way I looked at it is if you missed on Malik Willis, you know what? Fine. Is it going to kill the franchise? No. But could it have been something where maybe another team that needs a quarterback looked at the situation and goes, oh, well, we like Willis's upside. We like way down the field. We'll give you a draft pick for him. Sure. I mean, we talk about draft picks as currency. Quarterbacks are also currency. Like we've seen how much they go in the trade market. We see how much they get in return for trade. For me, like the worst case scenario, you draft Malik Willis in the third round, complete bust, can't play. Is it going to kill the Giants, especially a team that had 2 third-round picks, if Malik Willis wasn't the answer? Well, guess what? You were going to be looking for the new quarterback anyways, likely in next year's draft. But if he was the answer, then it would make your franchise so much. It would make it so much easier. Willis was a steal in the third round. I completely agree, Snoopy. Rich personally like the Giants. I think for everyone that knows, like I'm more of a Jets fan, but I watch both football teams. You know, I try to cover as much of New York sports as I can. You know, I love watching. I was watching the whole Giants game last night, basically with a notepad, like I always do. Like I'm one of the few people. Like most people are watching with a beer and chips. I have a notepad taking notes on guard play, on pass rush sets. So Yeah, a bit of a nerd, but I do like talking about the Giants. I do think it's important too to get as many opinions as I can about teams. And I think the Giants are a fascinating team, and they're really interested to see which direction they're going to go. But I keep arguing with Giant fans about this, and this is the scenario I point out to them. Like, if you're a Giant fan, it almost feels like just the way I've seen the interaction on Twitter, it just feels like there's no hope, and it's just like, oh, can we just fast forward to next year? Like, if you had a Malik Willis on this team and you played him in the second half of the season, it'd be interesting. Like, if they're playing Tyrod Taylor, unless the Giants are rolling off 7 or 8 games in a row of winnings, which I don't see happening with Tyrod, the Giants are an interesting team. Like, at least with Malik, it gives you something different, gives you something fresh. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, it feels like the Giants. The problem with the Giants right now is, like, you can be bad, but you got to be at least interesting. And the Giants, like, at least this year, don't even feel interesting. And that's a huge problem for a fan base, much like the Jets. And this is why I talk about both these teams, because the correlation between these two teams, like, I know Giant fans and Jet fans, like, love to say which one's better, which one's worse, but they've been pretty much in the same boat or in the similar circumstances for years now. And it feels like the Giants right now are at a critical crossroads, and you're hoping that they can pull themselves out of it. But you at least want to be interesting. Like, there were bad teams last year with fun quarterback play that was at least interesting. Like, if you're a Giant fan, do you really want to sit in November and watch Daniel Jones when you already know the answer? Uh, I'm a Mets, Yankees, Jets fan. Thanks, Snoopy. What's going on with Tony? Liked him coming out of Florida. Uh, Tony, to me, like, the biggest thing with Tony I worry about is the injuries. I like him as a receiver. I still don't know how he went in front of Elijah Moore. I think Elijah Moore was a better receiver than Tony. I had a mid-second round grade on Tony, to be honest with you, but it's clear when he's on, he's an incredibly dynamic player. But I am fascinated to see how he fits in the system. And this is really going to be interesting too, is seeing how the guys in the last 2 draft classes before Joe Shane's draft class are brought in. Because one of the things you did notice, like with the Jets and Joe Douglas, was the majority of the McCagnon guys, and look, they were terrible, but they were basically gutted and forgotten about. I'm kind of interested to see in terms of the Giants, which direction they go in that regard. Like, are they already going to start moving off from that? So, I'm just trying to check on Twitter to see if there's anything else right now. I know the Cardinals were trending on Twitter last night because they were wearing their alternate jerseys in the preseason, which I thought was a bit strange, to be honest with you. Uh, so, but no, I just feel like with this Giant team right now, the biggest concern, like, if you are this organization, has to be that this team isn't interesting late in the season. That's been the problem with both of these organizations, is the fan bases have lost hope by October. So you have empty stadium or visiting fans in November and December, and those owners, like, I guarantee you, they hate it. They hate the optics. That's in the print media. They hate that it's being spoofed on SNL. They hate all of that. Moore's looking like a young Antonio Brown. What do you think? Rich? AB was more explosive. Yeah, AB was more explosive, and I'm not. Well, he's also been more explosive off the field as well. I mean, his social media has been crazy. Like, to me, Elijah Moore, his makeup, you can tell he's a professional, how he approaches the game. And, like, he might not be, in terms of talent, like one of the better receivers, but you just love the way he comes in as a professional, the way he handles himself, the way he basically conducts his business. Like, and the Jets have talked about him. Like, I know Garrett Wilson gets a lot of talk because of how good he's looked at camp, but there's a chance that when receivers explode, it's usually year 2. And this could be a very fun this could be a very fun year for Elijah Moore, and this could be the year where he does truly take that next step forward. And I wouldn't be shocked if he does. Like, I really do think, like, he has the potential to really take a big step forward. And you, unfortunately, last year got injured late in the season. I thought we were really going to see that take off into the next portion. But don't forget, too, Elijah Moore's now got a lot of help around him. And the Giants, too, for Kadarius Toney to be great, they're going to need him to get help. And look, I think we know the quarterback's limited, but you need Kenny Galladay to come back, be healthy, and make an impact. And you need Wan'Dale Robinson to make an impact as well. Because if both of those guys can make an impact, that makes Kadarius' life a lot easier. But Tony's going to get a lot of double teams and more attention if Galladay isn't playing well, if Galladay's not running the routes hard, if Galladay's getting hurt. And if Robinson can pop, if Robinson can really take off and look good early, that's really going to help this team and really help them going forward. And look, the more great receivers you have, the more better looks you're going to get, the more open you have the potential to get, because they're not shifting the coverage to take you out of the game. And look, Snoopy, I get that Toney is talented. Like, he's got great upside. The question for him is, can he stay healthy? Can he stay on the straight and narrow? Because, like, the one that I will give Toney credit for this. Toney last year was really concerning because he had that whole thing where he showed up in training camp where the shoes didn't fit, so he was running around barefoot in practice. Then you had the whole vaccination thing. Like, he just had weird off the field issues, and that to me was a big red flag. But I give Toney a lot of credit this offseason. Last year, I was about ready to write him off, saying, look, for someone that got thrown out of a game for throwing a punch, for that was injury prone, and look, we saw the talent, but we didn't see a great bit of production. And now you add the off the field issues. Like, you even heard like the rumors before the draft. Don't forget there was those rumors where they're like, oh, they're looking to already trade Kadarius Toney. I never really believed those rumors, but it was interesting because I do wonder if this organization was sending a message. Because look, one of the biggest things as an NFL player, it's one thing when you're in an organization and the front office and the coaching staff that drafted you is there, because you know that they have a vested interest in you. I mean, they passed on a lot of other options to bring you in. They like your skill set. They believe what you can bring to the table will help this team succeed. But that gets a lot different when a new coaching staff with a new scheme, with new values come in. And guess what? Their reputation isn't based off of you because they didn't draft you. As far as they're concerned, they have a clean slate. And if they don't feel you fit into the culture or into the system or into what they are trying to build, it's easier to move off of. And you see it with good players, but they just aren't good fits. I think a great example that we're talking about with the New York teams is Denzel Mims. I know we've talked about nauseam for the Jets, and I'll just bring him up briefly. But one of the reasons I think Denzel Mims has struggled is because he was drafted by a very different coach for a very different scheme. And Toney this offseason really had to prove to this organization, to the staff, and look, they didn't fully believe necessarily in him. I mean, they invested a high draft pick in a receiver, in a very talented receiver draft, and you heard all those rumors this offseason. So I give Toney a lot of credit. He's been bunged up this preseason. You hope he can do it the entire year, but that was a big concern after last year. Neil has struggled, but the other thing I've noticed, though, is a lot of the tackles. Ike Ekwonu struggled. The only one that's really not struggling right now is Charles Cross. But Cross is an older player, and Cross was different than Neil and then with Icky, because both of those players, I believe, have higher upsides and physically gifted. Cross was just a great pass blocker. You knew day one he was going to be a great pass blocker, but you knew he had a limited ceiling. He kind of reminded me a lot of like a DeBrickashaw. He'd be a good pass blocker, not going to give you much punch in the run game, but a consistent player. And he probably will never be a top 5 or 7 left tackle, but would he be probably in that 7 to 10 category, a good solid tackle? Maybe doesn't get a lot of Pro Bowls, but it's just solid. Yeah, I think that's what Cross is basically, because of the big three, Snoopy, this is why I'm saying he was rated lower, was because he didn't have that punch in the run game. And also, he didn't have the physical gifts that Neal had and also that Icky had. But you've also seen, too, that they were guys that have played multiple positions and guys that probably could have used a little bit more reps. And you're seeing in a bit of the preseason, you're seeing the flashes. But offensive lines also get hurt more, and it takes them a lot longer to develop because offensive lines are the one position that's been hurt most by training camps, where the lack of reps that they get together, the lack of hitting that they get together, it takes a lot to get up to game speed and build that chemistry. So it's very hard. Look, Neal has struggled in this preseason. I think you gotta give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, I just feel like Neal, there's going to be times he's going to struggle this year, and we've seen it a lot with Alabama offensive linemen. And part of it, I get. Like, when you're an Alabama offensive lineman, I think part of the problem that you run into is because you are so dominant and you have so many great offensive linemen next to you, you know you're going to get a lot of one-on-ones. You know you're going to be probably bigger and stronger than anyone you're going to get against. But now you move to the NFL, you got bigger guys, faster guys. It's a bit of a shell shock when you first come into the league. And also, you got Neal moving to the right side. Yes, he's played there, but the last couple of years he's been on the left side, and that's a big adjustment. And you're dealing with pass rushers and not so great guards next to you. Maybe decent starting guards, but that's probably the highest end guard you have next to you. So for Neal, I know if you're a Giant fan and he gives up some sacks early, give it some time. I really think you want to see that progression throughout the year. But look, I think Cross to me was the guy who could come in and probably start the left tackle right away and give you the most early. But long term, I still think Neal and Icky had the more upside. And the other thing too is the Giants really didn't need a left tackle. They had Andrew Thomas. And at that point, it kind of, I think, came down to Cross was a good left tackle, but you already have your left tackle in Thomas, sorry. So do you go and try to get a good right tackle? And Neal offered that versatility. And I still feel like worst case scenario, and I know Giant fans might not want to hear this, but I almost feel Neal is not a bustable player in terms of if he cannot make it as a tackle, I think he's got the physical gifts to be one of the better guards in football. I mean, he can play all those different positions. That's the versatility. Like Cross, if he couldn't make it as a tackle, I don't think he'd be able to make it in the NFL. Neal and Icky, you knew that they could be some of the best guards in the league, but you're putting them out the tackle position because you're looking for great tackles. So even if Neal maybe doesn't make it as a great tackle, you could always eventually move him into guard, and he does offer you that versatility. Would you have taken a QB in the first round for the G-Men? No. This is why I think this poll might be getting misconstrued, because I did see the results. It was 67%. No, now it's 50-50. I was saying the way the draft fell, the Giants had an opportunity to draft pretty much any quarterback they liked in the third round, especially I thought Malik Willis was the only guy I would have considered for a first-round quarterback. The Giants only had one crack, but two cracks at him in the third round. They had 2 third-round picks. I would have taken an opportunity there. Because to me, if you missed on a third-round quarterback, it's not going to kill your franchise, but if you hit, it's going to be huge. And look, the Giants don't have an answer at quarterback. Until you have an answer at quarterback, keep drafting quarterbacks, keep looking the trade market for quarterbacks, do whatever you can to get as many good quarterbacks, or try to hedge your bet and try to get as many opportunities to find that good quarterback. So that's what I was saying, where with the Giants, I just felt like after that draft, it was like, okay, they've improved this team, and it does feel like they're playing the long game, looking already toward next year. But still, I would have taken a shot on Willis because worst case scenario, he's a bust. It's not going to kill this team that they had used a third-round pick on a quarterback. But if Daniel Jones struggles or gets hurt again, which we've seen him have injury problems in his career, like if you're a Giant fan, you're in the middle of October. This team is 2-4. Daniel Jones is either struggling or is injured or looks completely over his skis. Like, what is more appealing as a Giant fan? What's better to watch for this team while you're rebuilding? A young quarterback who has the chance to be your franchise quarterback, or Tyrod Taylor, who you know what he is, You know he's a game manager. Yeah, he might win you 2 or 3 games, but you know he's not the long-term answer to this team. You pretty much a lot of Giant fans, the way I've been seeing them react, I don't see them feel like, all right, Daniel Jones is the answer. So this to me, like I just felt like the Giants got a gift in their lap where you had Malik. And look, I know Matt Corral's now out for the year, but there was Matt Corral there. It was basically your pick. And I get it. This was not a great pick of the litter. But when you don't have a quarterback and you don't have an answer for your quarterback, like if this team had used the third round pick to trade back and get more picks for next year, that to me would have been smart. If you were going to take a quarterback this year, we're hell bent on not taking a quarterback. I would have done everything to get more picks for next year's draft. Like, did you notice what the Eagles did? I mean, we all know they made the headlines with AJ Brown. We all know about the trades that they made, but we all forget they got more picks for next year and another first round pick. So what's that tell you? Like, yeah, we like Jalen Hurts. We think he's good, but just in case, we're going to have ammunition to go and get a quarterback. And even in this year's draft for the Giants, like the problem is I don't think a team is going to come up early to get a quarterback. But I did like some later offensive linemen. I was figuring with the second first round pick, if a team was that desperate for Evan Neal or that desperate to get a great player, if I was the Giants and could get not a first round, but even move back, but get a second round pick for next year, it would make more sense. One thing I agree with PFF about every year, you draft a QB, even if you have a franchise one, because if he's any good, you could always flip him for good QB and have one. And like you see this all the time. I mean, think about how many quarterbacks have gotten draft picks traded for them, and some of them have been god awful players. And like I've been saying, like even the only one I disagree is like when the Jets drafted James Morgan. Jesus, that was a terrible pick. But like if you don't have even if you have a good quarterback, if you feel you could, if there's a good quarterback in the draft in the third or fourth round that you feel can develop into a very good backup and win you a game or two if you need to. Because don't forget now, the season's longer. There's 17 games now. Basically, there's only one bye in the playoffs. Like, it almost feels like a lot of these teams are slowly starting to realize there's a chance my starting quarterback isn't going to play all 17 games. It's a freaking marathon. So you want to get Captain Morgan's slander. Yeah, like I was talking about James Morgan, the Jets quarterback. So you know that here. But I think one of the best examples of drafting a quarterback has to be the Washington Commanders. Because I remember when they drafted Robert Griffin and people crucified them for drafting Kirk Cousins later in that draft. It ended up being a smart pick because Robert Griffin got hurt. And look, say what you want about Kirk Cousins. I understand that Kirk Cousins doesn't move the needle. I understand that Kirk Cousins isn't a great quarterback. But let me ask Giant fans this. What would you give up if Daniel Jones was Kirk Cousins? Like you would die if Daniel Jones could play up to the level of Kirk Cousins. And look, was Kirk Cousins an elite quarterback? No. But has he been a solid quarterback in this league? Did he stabilize that Washington franchise for years? I mean, look what's happened to Washington since they moved on. I mean, now they're rolling the dice with Carson Wentz. And even in Minnesota, yeah, I know it hasn't been great in Minnesota, but Minnesota's been in the playoffs with Cousins. And look, they've been 8-7-1, 10-5, making the playoffs, 7-9, 8-8. I mean, yeah, they're not great, but at least they're in the playoff hunt and they're playing meaningful games in December and January, which I think both New York franchises would kill for right now. Yeah, Jimmy G was a good trade. So like I just look back at that Giants draft and look in the third round, if the Giants had went out there and gotten players that you felt like, okay, they were going to make a big impact on the team, like they had a legitimate chance to start, I would have been, okay, that's fine. But they draft Cordell Flott. Now, again, we all knew that they were going to move off of Bradbury. But I didn't think the corner was the biggest issue. Like, I looked at the draft too, like, with still on the clock, you had Nakobe Dean. You had Nakobe Dean, who looks great in Philadelphia and could be a starting linebacker for this team. Now, I will admit, and I do have to, I'm just reading the draft picks, and I do apologize because I did make a slight, I believe, mistake. I'm just checking here where I thought, yeah, no, I was right. Both Giant picks were before Malik Willis. So they even drafted Desmond Ridder was still on the board if they like them, but they drafted Joshua Uzeta, the guard from North Carolina, and he was a bit of a project. Like, personally, I like Nicholas Petit Ferrer on the board. I mean, Chad Muma was on the board. Like, if they had drafted like Chad Muma, that was someone I thought could start. Even Abraham Lucas, he's looked really good for Seattle this year. Like, I just looked at this board and I'm looking at the players on the board. Like, are you kidding me? Oh, here's another one. Like, how did the Giants, like, this was this, like, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a draft tangent. If you know me, you know I'm a draft nerd. Like, I forgot about this. And this is one of the reasons I also really I didn't mind the Giants first. Obviously, I love the Giants first round, like their second round. Actually, really like their day 3, but I really felt their hole came in the third round because I looked at guys on the board like Travis Jones. I was like, okay, he could be the starting nose tackle on this team this year and make an impact. I'm looking at Chad Muma, a really good linebacker. Like, there was a good linebackers that can make an impact this season. But instead, they drafted a guard, and even at the time, like, yeah, we're hoping he develops into a starter. You do that on day 3. You don't do that on day 2 of the draft. And then even later, before they got to Malik Willis. So later in the draft, Giants are back again on the clock when they dropped the flat with 81. This is who is still on the board. Malik Willis, Nakobe Dean. I mean, I like DeMarvin Leal. I don't know how great he's going to be. But there were some decent players that I was like, really? Like, we're going to pass on, like, Majai Sanders, who seems like a good fit as a pass rusher. We're going to pass on a quarterback. Like, that's the thing. Like, if the Giants had done, like, we drafted Travis Jones or Nakobe Dean or guys that are like, look, we feel like these guys are going to start for us this year, I would say, you know what? Fine. I agree. But when I look back at that draft, I'm going, the 2 guys they drafted felt like project players. And I know that the long-term plan is looking toward next season. But if you're looking at those type of players at that point, take a quarterback. At least give this team some hope. At least give them something. And look, who knows? What if Malik Willis doesn't get on the field for the Giants, but he looks great in the preseason, and then we get to next preseason, he lights up the preseason again. Another team goes, look, we couldn't find the right quarterback we had. We'll give you draft picks. Like, you could still exchange him for currency if a quarterback has any talent or shows any bit of talent that he can play in this league. There will be a team or teams, plural, that will line up his services. That's just the way it works. But again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you're a Jet fan, we will be back later this evening to discuss the Jets preseason game. A lot of action, of course. If you're a baseball fan, the Subway Series is tonight. So much great stuff on sports today. And other news around the NFL, Baker Mayfield getting an opportunity. And I still remember when Colin Cowherd says, Sam Darnold got a second team to give him a chance. Baker cannot find a second team. That's the difference. Well, ironically, it's going to be Baker, and I will say, like, I'm dying now to watch that first game of the season. Sorry, that first game of the year is between the Panthers and the Browns. That is going to be exciting. Like, can we move that to? Is it possible to move that to Thursday Night Football? I'm just asking. I think that could be. I mean, not Thursday. I mean Sunday Night Football. Jesus, that to me is really intriguing. But again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you want more Giants content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If there's certain Giants stories you want me to talk about, make sure to comment below. If you have questions, comment below. I'll get to them in the next video. But again, guys, appreciate you for joining us as always. I'll see you next time here on Rich Sports Talk.